Hello, and thank you for listening. Before we dive into today's exciting episode, I have a small request. If you're enjoying the Book and Lounge podcast, please take a moment to subscribe. Your support helps us to continue to bring you engaging discussions on your favourite books. In this episode, I'm joined by Kay, Taiwo, and Yvonne to discuss the issues raised in Diane Abbott's memoir, A Woman Like Me. Let's hear what everyone had to say. So, A Woman Like Me, Diane Abbott's memoirs. And this follows her life all the way through, up to almost now. But I was disappointed that it wasn't up to now. But anyway, I think we'll get to that later. And yes, it's just about her life, growing up in West London, her life at university, how she got into politics after she finished university, and the dynamics of the Labour Party. So there's a lot in there, and there's a lot of things that she reveals about how the civil service works, how government works, how charities work that I personally wasn't aware of or familiar with. So I guess the first question to you guys is that, were there any big revelations from reading this book? Yvonne, you're nodding.
So there's a lot of history, particularly the 70s, from when she started, that I wasn't as familiar with. But what I found particularly revealing was just the internal workings of the Labour Party and how they can try to destroy each other, and how you can be an outsider in your own party, and that people may not be championing you when you're doing well. I found that really surprising. Maybe it's not surprising, but I found it surprising. I thought those were the works of things like Tories and Conservatives. But here we are. So I found it amusing as well. There were bits that I thought were amusing, especially the part where she says about Thatcher, something to the effect that it was as if they had massacred matron. There were many others that I thought were amusing. Learned a lot about Ken Livingstone as well. I mean, I didn't know the backstory to Ken Livingstone, because I think when I arrived in this country, he was mayor, and didn't realize there was rich history behind him. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but just her courage, her conviction, especially when she's been so abused in the media, and she's a caricature, and you just don't quite grasp how much substance she has. Mm-hmm. So that's what was revealing to me.
I thought her backbone was probably made of titanium, because she has so much determination and grit to stay the course. I know that there are times when she was talking about, had it not been friends and relatives maybe encouraging her not to quit, that there have been a couple of times when she would have quit, but nevertheless she never did quit. I think the fact that she was considering quitting and leaving politics just shows, she's just like everyone else. There are limits, and she has her own vulnerabilities and feelings. That being said, I haven't really read any great political memoirs, so I haven't really got anything to compare it to. But someone did say that she's not a natural storyteller, and I think that that's how I would put it. It was okay, interesting, but not, for me, a great read.
Is a memoir supposed to be a story telling, though?
It depends on how you tell your memoir, because it's going to have a beginning and it's going to have a middle and an end. It's just how you lay it out. I mean, she's had a very interesting life, as Yvonne was saying. I'm not saying she had to jazz it up. It's just the way she told it was very factual. It's very matter of fact, and not flat, but not as engaging as I would have liked. It's a decent read. For me, it was a decent read. It's just that maybe I expected more.
I really enjoyed this book. I take others' point about maybe the style of writing. She has got this matter-of-fact way. And I should say, actually, that I listened to the audiobook, which I found to be a really enjoyable experience. She's got a very distinct voice, and usually I don't like listening to books narrated by the author. But I think there was something about how personal this story was and hearing it from her mouth that really enhanced that listening experience, for want of a better term. It's interesting to hear Yvonne say, there was so much I didn't know, so I learned. I felt like there was things I knew that she gave me greater insight to. I lived in her constituency. I grew up there, so I've known her as my MP for some time. She's one of the few prominent Black women who have been prominent for an extended period of time. So I feel like I've grown up with her in some ways. And I didn't appreciate all that had gone into that. And maybe we'll talk about, you know, her activism, her work, things I've known about but had no idea that she was somehow behind and had spearheaded that. I really enjoyed the early chapters, kind of that experience of being the child of immigrants, you know, talking about being a fish out of water in these social environments. I found those quite endearing. And then as she goes on, I really too enjoyed learning about the politics of the Labour Party. I wasn't surprised by some of what she was saying, but it was disheartening as you were reading it. So take the point about might not have been the jazziest of stories, but for me it was still a good read.
I quite like the fact that it was straight to the point and matter of fact. I thought she told things as they were and as they happened. And I didn't think that took away from it at all. I didn't have an issue with her writing style. I quite enjoyed it. And as Yvonne said, it was actually quite humorous. I absolutely enjoyed it. I learned quite a bit. There's a lot of things that I did not know. The workings of charities, for example, and the lefty liberals, and actually what they actually think about the people that they're supposed to be helping. That was an eye-opener for me. The power of the civil service and how the Home Office is actually known as using the dark something. I mean, I knew about her experience within the Labour Party because I think at some point there was a WhatsApp message that leaked, and this was a Labour Party member communicating with a journalist and saying all sorts of things about Diane Abbott. But I didn't realize how fragmented the Labour Party is and the inner workings of it. I didn't realize that actually how it operated. You know, I like politics. And I've always somehow had a soft spot for Labour. But having read this, I'm like, actually, my loyalty is misguided here. This is not who I should be giving my votes to.
I think I should have listened to the audio because then I would have been able to hear how she says Jeremy. That would probably have made a difference for me.
You wanted salacious gossip.
I think that's what you were after, isn't it?
What did you say? Okay.
You were looking for gossip, weren't you?
I wanted the nitty gritty, the salacious, details. But she's never gonna.
No,
she's too diplomatic, isn't she?
She is, and something that came through is, as a Black woman, how she has to conduct herself in certain spaces. There are certain things you don't get away with as a Black woman. It's conversations I've had in workplaces. There are certain jokes where you could be in the room, but no, they're not for you to tell because they won't be received in the same way. And I just wonder, she's someone who's been mocked and she kind of goes through that in the story. Imagine if she had told this typical memoir and gone into quite details about her affairs and her losses and her loves. I wouldn't surprise me if that would have been used to further denigrate her.
It would have been headline in the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
she's not Boris Johnson. She can't get away with just about anything.
No, she really can't. And there's an incident in the book where she talks about that, the infamous incident of getting the numbers wrong. I remember hearing that and just cringing, but she puts it into context and says, look, this wasn't the first time, many other people have.
Done it, exactly.
And there's somebody else as well. I'm not boring, but I do sometimes watch like BBC Parliament. And there's a baroness on there who made a huge error. I forget her name, but when she was an MP, and she was mocked at the time, but it was a 24-hour news story, and then it went away. It wasn't the thing that haunted her. And some of that hurt and some of that sense of unfairness does come through in the narrative.
So then that leads me to a question. Why is it that she's hated so much by so many.
Because she's a black woman, isn't it?
A black woman, and she is the first black woman to get into Parliament in 1987. She has taken the bashing for all of us who have stood up in the workplace, politics. She has, in fact, I'm quite astounded by how she just keeps going. You know, if you look at all the stuff she does, she will become a member of Parliament. She will try to be Labour leader. She will try to be Mayor of London. She will just keep going, you know, and she will show her face. And the establishment do not want to see a black woman appearing and reappearing again and again and again.
Yeah, I think that point about her being first as well. The first one always has to take the battering. And it's interesting because there are now more, not many, but there are now more black women MPs. But I feel like it's this mixture, and it comes out in the book, this mixture of her being the first and also the time. I actually found it quite uncomfortable listening to the way she was spoken about. And I was Googling some of these old news stories. In our lifetime, what was allowed, what was permissible. She talks about Alistair Campbell, somebody I'm not a particular fan of, but what his wife is a journalist, and she kind of makes this pointed reference to it. But the stories she used to write about Diane, you know, the blacks of the albatross around Kinnock's neck and all of that stuff. You read it and you sort of go, wow, that's what they used to be able to say and get away with. You know, nobody thought nothing of talking about Diane as being a woman, you know, with a chip on her shoulder. Oh, she's very chippy. Things now that you would cringe at. So it's, the earlier point about titanium, I don't know if I could have stood that for as long as she has.
But do you also not think that it's also because she continuously stands her ground? You know, she's firmly to the left. So, you know, when the Blairites came in, she was still firmly to the left. So if she believes in something, she sticks to it. She's not going to be swayed. She will not soften. And typically, black people do wave and soften to make life a little bit easier for themselves. She doesn't.
I think people found that infuriating. Plus the fact that she's very competent and capable. I think that was just another level of reason for them to hate her and all the vitriol that they threw at her. And she's dark-skinned as well. That didn't help because it's like a red rag to a bull for many of them.
So we mentioned that there are other black female MPs in Parliament now. So is it that they toe the line?
I don't think they toe the line. I'm thinking of people like Dawn Butler. You know, she's been quite outspoken and has firmly planted herself on the left.
I guess the point I was trying to say is that Diane Abbott and Dawn Butler are the two, if you say, you know, female black MPs, let's forget what's her name, Badenoch for now. But if you say female black MPs, those are the two that come to mind. You don't really immediately think about any others.
So
does that mean you're excluding the brown MPs, female brown MPs?
No,
we're talking about like black women in particular, right? So at the moment, Belle Ribeiro Addy,
that's the one. Brixton. She's Brixton.
Kate Ottermore, Marsha de Cordova, so I think she is related to Cordova Reid, a footballer, but Marsha de Cordova, and then Miata Fanbule, who came in, I think, at the last election. She's been there the longest.
Yeah.
But also, you know, she's been there the longest. She was the first black woman MP. I think I took for granted. I knew she was the first black MP, but then to hear her talk about the struggle she had to get elected in that night, all of a sudden it sounds like an amazing thing she achieved. Remember, she's had some profile as she was on that show with Michael Portillo for a long time. Yeah. So that gave her an element of profile. And she's tabloid fodder. She has been and will be for a long time.
I think you're right. I think she's high profile black woman in politics, and she has become the target for this deep-seated prejudices. And she's the face.
I want to go back to her childhood. So I think, as I mentioned earlier on, she grew up in West London, to Jamaican parents who'd come. They would come here separately, but they met. They'd known each other when they were back home. They came here separately. They met again, and things continued from there. And so it was just her and her brother growing up in Paddington. And I just really wanted to discuss her upbringing, decisions her father made, and how those impacted her trajectory into what she became.
Even going on to university, like that generation, they put a premium on education and she took full advantage of that. So it's a great example of actually how to nurture your parents can really shape your worldview, particularly being like first generation as well, and her parents coming into this country. I think something as well that came through for me, a lot of that felt very familiar to me because her parents were my grandparents' generation. Just how hard they worked, actually. I think sometimes it's taken for granted, but I've heard all the stories of my grandparents who nothing was on credit, everything was saved for. They worked really hard, a few items of clothing a year, and you looked after them and they lasted. And it was very important to get the kids into education, and that comes through. And I got listening to this story, like this sense of pride. Mm-hmm. Regretful how her father treated her mother, but pride in that he was a hard-working man and achieved something. And the same for her mother, even if it sounds like it tore the family apart.
Yeah, and I feel that her father's decisions impacted her and how she then turned out and the confidence that she had. I think it's based on the kind of upbringing that she was getting from home. And yes, I do get that the father wasn't exactly a nice person, but then we also have to think, and I think she does mention this, he was getting all this racism at work, and then who do you take it out on? You take it out on the person you think is below you, which in this instance, unfortunately, was his mum, and at some point, sometimes his family. But at the same time, although he was horrible in that respect, he made sure that the links, although they were living in Harrow, the links with the West Indian community in Paddington was not broken. He made sure that the children learned the culture. He would always take them back to Paddington to hang out with the family and parties and so on. So the decision that he made not to send her back to Jamaica, because I think at that time, parents, you had children, you just send them back home to be raised by grandparents. That was really important that she didn't go to Jamaica and she stayed here. I'm not sure if she would have become who she has had she gone back to Jamaica.
I think she described him as very strict, traditional Jamaican father who expected discipline and high standards. And yes, he supported her education and her ambitions, but he was a disgusting bully when it came to being a husband. For me, I found that really off-putting.
And his reaction on her graduation as well, that for me was just unacceptable.
Totally unacceptable.
I agree, it's horrible, but do you think those judgments are being made with perhaps a modern day lens? I have to say, I've read some of that behaviour, and some of it didn't surprise me of that generation.
Yeah, and I think you're right. We have a book club at work. Right? We read one about the Yorkshire Ripper, but this book has so many things. I mean, it has child abuse, he has domestic abuse, it obviously has murder because it's the Yorkshire Ripper, and it basically affairs, people having affairs, racism.
It's non-fiction.
Everything in it. It's fiction, but it's based on people who lived at the time, and the author's father actually knew the Ripper. So we were discussing this in the book club, and actually everybody said, back in the day, that was normal. All of those things that you just described were normal. So I do agree with you, Kay. We are looking at this with a modern lens. And when people did things like that in the past, it's just like, yeah, okay, well, he's just being a man.
We are still having men being very abusive in today's world. It's still happening. And the thing is, of course, she loves her father and she's become very successful and she's who she is because of the upbringing that she got from her father. However, we cannot brush aside the fact that he was an abusive man. I mean, the fact that he would tell his wife to go and sit in the kitchen because he disagreed with whatever it is. I can't remember what she did. And then the wife spent weeks in the kitchen, not allowed to interact with her children. That is abusive behavior in any era.
Come on, it's just banned.
It's not.
It's controlled coercion. Is it controlled coercion?
Yeah, it is. I think it is.
I felt liberated when she ran away. I was like, good for you.
He wasn't just one thing. He was many things, as we all are. We're both, light and darkness in one person.
True.
I mean, I liked his work ethic. And I like the fact that even if maybe he couldn't articulate certain things, he maybe seemed to have this, I don't know whether it's an innate knowledge or just an understanding. Because the whole thing about going to the university when he carries a briefcase and there's nothing in the briefcase, but he needs that kind of, like Snoopy in a comfort blanket or whatever, you need that prop, don't you? You feel that you're on equal terms with the people because you're feeling out of your comfort zone, out of your depth. So you need a prop, you need something, a talisman to hold on to. So he's recognizing these things. And I like the way when she's writing about him, she's writing from a position of the benefit of hindsight, isn't it? Because she's older, she's wise, she's more experienced. She has a certain understanding. She may not have liked what he did, but she understands much more. She has a better insight into probably what was making him tick and the pressures that he was under at that time.
And she does say that towards the end. She understands why he did some of the things that he did.
She loved her father.
Yeah, she did.
Despite the fact that he was nasty in many ways, but she loved her father and her mother.
Yeah, that comes through. I don't know about others, but I felt like there was an understanding, if not an acceptance, but an understanding of what drove those behaviours. It sounded really hard, and it sounded like it had a long impact. It cast a long shadow over the family, because I think she hints at, but again doesn't really get into the detail of her brother and her mother never quite reconciling, for example. So again, I would like to have heard a bit more about that, but I felt that was Diane, the respectful Diane, just drawing a line.
His privacy.
About those issues.
Yeah.
Not her story to tell, because I was also interested in the brother. But yeah, like you said, not really her story to tell, so she didn't tell it.
Do you think that the relationship with her parents then had an impact on her being able to build relationships herself? Romantic relationships I'm talking about.
I think so. Yeah, because she I think besides Peter, her first boyfriend, I think he brought her a lot of stability.
He did, yeah.
I think thereafter, she does...
Jeremy?
Well, Jeremy was very brief. It was quite curious how she mentioned how the affair started and then very quickly says by then he had left his first wife, because there was a lot of controversy around her affair and him supposedly being still married. But she sort of makes it quite clear in that sentence where she starts talking about Jeremy and the affair that, But she's also quite flippant about, when she starts moving into media, and how she got into media is because she had an affair with a married guy, and she was quite casual about it.
Yeah. Her lover who told her that she'll be good for TV, and if he told her that she'd be good at caterwauring, she'd have gone into caterwauring.
Yeah. He was married, didn't seem to bother any of us.
Yeah.
That kind of went over my head. I missed.
You missed that. I picked that up immediately.
You see, that bit made me laugh out loud. Especially the cutter rearing. And it just made me think, actually, was she just really that naive at the time? Or was she just so confident because he told her you'll be good for TV? And then the next day she's, applying for jobs in TV. Is that a level of confidence she gets because she went to Cambridge? Because I don't know how many people where someone would tell you, oh, you I don't know, you'll be good at something, and then the next day they're applying to do that thing.
All of the above, I think.
I think she was good at a lot of things. I think she demonstrated that wherever she went, she seemed to be making a big success because she moved around quite a lot, different organizations, and made an impact. And I think what stood out for me was, I was thinking to myself, how many groups, how many projects, how many conferences has she started? She just had this bias towards action, something that I really admire all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel that we've lost some of that, this activism, because she was setting up all these groups, joining all these activist groups where people were actually campaigning to get things done. And I feel that as a community, we do not do that as much anymore. And I'm wondering whether because we feel we're now comfortable, we can now get into certain jobs, and racism at work is not as in your face as it used to be. So we've become way too comfortable and we're no longer fighting to improve things. What do you guys think? Why have we stopped?
I thought it was all the pre-social media age, wasn't it? So the grassroots activism was very much the way in which you organized. You organized on the ground. So if it's knocking on doors and all the rest of it, it was very practical rather than virtual. It's not like an Obama kind of campaign where you're using social media, you're attracting the young vote. Although with that being said,
Obama was knocking on doors.
Yes, but he's one of the first, wasn't he, US presidents to really engage with the whole social media and the online way of campaigning as well as. But this was all pre that, so there was no other way. And she seemed to be very good. She's very good at facilitating, making things happen. She's a people person, so she's able to gather people together in one cause, which is, as Yvonne is saying, she was very successful in setting up so many different groups, which seemed to do a lot of good work. I mean, had her party been behind her, who knows what level she would have reached. She should have gone really, really far and made real differences in society, brought about real change. Because it seems to me that, unlike a lot of these professional politicians, her heart was really in terms of, serving the people, bringing about a positive change for the majority of people, the people that had no voice, the people that were underserved, underrepresented, and so on and so forth. But she just wasn't really given a proper chance. But despite that, she still went far. She just would have gone much further.
I agree with that. I think it's more though, not to get into the politics of race and how deep and wide that goes, but I think there was a clearer sense of what the problem was back in the 60s and 70s, and people campaigned against that. Nothing came before it, so they were the first and they led the charge. And then maybe now, we've picked off all the low-hanging fruit. These issues become much harder to articulate and campaign against. It just felt so practical then, you can get up and do something. Today, these feel much broader and maybe harder conversations to have. I'm not sure if I'm being very clear here, but for example, she talks about young Black kids in school. So she sets up the network, and she's campaigning against these things about the London School Black Network. There are clear things, and then she talks about the Saturday School movement, where looking back, that was completely radical. A bunch of Black parents said, our kids aren't being educated in school. Yeah, no worry. We'll educate them on the weekends and we'll make sure they're being... Can you imagine Black parents today coming together and doing that?
No.
I think there was a sense of maybe community in the time you were in. Perhaps it was easier to work together. I just think there is this sense of togetherness that's been lost.
I agree.
I think social media maybe exacerbates that, but I think it predates social media, that loss in let's all just get together. Yeah, politically, some people say we're maybe more divided now than perhaps we were before. I just don't think that idea of community exists anymore. And for some people, that's perfectly acceptable and that's fine. But in some ways, it does feel like a bit of a loss.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that also maybe that in the past, people like Diane, they worked within the system, like joining Labour, standing for election, whereas maybe young people today just don't trust traditional politics because they think it's slow to change. The other thing is, I think also there's economic pressures and fear of consequences more now with young people. I don't know, student debt, housing crisis, job insecurity.
Absolutely.
Riskier. I might be wrong.
No, I think that's like the economic pressures. I think that's a big part of it. And I don't think that's just for Black people or just for particular communities. Her dad bought a house. Her mum was a housewife and her dad was able to work, buy a house, move them out, buy a second house. Do you know who today could exist
while raising a family
on one income?
As a labourer, you know what I mean?
Economically, that's just not possible now. So all of those things come into play as well. Parents gave up their time to educate kids on the weekend. These days, a lot of parents I know, it's shift work they're doing. They're working or on the weekend or tired. So I do think there are practical constraints into it as well. It's not just one thing, but it's just like this confluence of issues that just come together. These things are harder today. Go on.
So things are worse than they were. But as a society, we're just sitting back and taking it rather than going out and picketing and striking and shouting on the streets to make things better.
I think we're frightened. I think there's more surveillance, there's stricter protest laws, police power to just shut down activism.
And look at the miners strike. The police were there constantly.
We're on our iPhones. We don't have time to be worrying about the big issues. This is the problem.
I agree. See now, that one I definitely agree with. I think things like Netflix, social media, there's such a distraction. Rather than go out there now and protest about all these horrible things that are happening with society, we'd rather just bury our heads in the sand and, watch out adolescents on Netflix. Well, why not? We'll shout about it, we'll talk about it on social media, but we'll go back and then watch the next series that comes up or whatever next is on after that. So I feel that as this is, and this is not just Black people, I just think as a society, we've lost that I don't know how to describe it, but we're not incensed enough anymore. And it could be that we've just given up.
Maybe
we don't care. We've been battered and beaten because no matter how much we protested, nothing's really changed. So we're like, well, been there, done that. We don't really care.
Do you know? There's been a change, hasn't there?
To be fair, when sorry, carry on.
No, I'm just saying there's been a change over time in terms of the way society seems to think. And, when you're mentioning adolescence and the whole idea of the manosphere and the fact that many of these young boys or men seem to lack purpose in life or in society or know what their position or role or future is. Now, what Kate was saying about many of these things back at the height of Diane's powers, they were low-hanging fruit. Something like adolescence and all the issues that it raises is definitely not low-hanging fruit. It's very nebulous. It's something that our parents' generation can't quite grasp, which is why adolescence really touched a nerve. And then you had also Gareth Southgate writing in, talking about it as well. And then you had Kirsten. You've got so many people talking about it because it's become very topical. But when we met the last time, someone was talking about the whole thing of unbossing, which is another thing that you're talking about in terms of societal change. So the whole idea with the pandemic, then the unbossing, is the whole issue of how people, especially young people, are thinking about what is the purpose of just grinding away 9 to 5, trying to, buy a house, raise a family, and all the rest. And I'm never going to be able to afford. So there's been a kind of a kind of a mental shift, hasn't there? Plus the whole issue of the eco anxiety that a lot of the young people have as well. So there's these different layers. So we're not in the same place that we were then, now.
I was just going to add as well, I don't know if you've heard of this thing, that this saying that strong parents raise weak children, hard times create strong men. But basically what it suggests is that people like Abbott, who were the strong parents, who may have gone through a significant struggle to succeed, they will protect their children from that same hardship and provide a comfortable life. Now, without adversity, these children start lacking resilience or problem-solving skills and even a strong work ethic, because there's some entitlement or lack of appreciation. That's just throwing another angle. Yeah.
So that African proverb then, the whole African proverb of may your road be rough, it applies then, doesn't it? That adversity creates character creates resilience, and that robustness to survive whatever the environment and life throws at you to a larger extent.
But you learn to build your resilience when you're younger, going without. You learn how to survive, how to get on, how to make do. So I can see how that's been taken away. But you talked about the shift. People can't get on the housing ladder. These big changes in expectations. Again, that speaks to the changes in the economic reality for many young people. We're in a crazy place where work doesn't necessarily pay for a lot of people. You can be in work and still qualify for benefits. Like your labour is not enough. And there's been lots of discussions at the moment about, just this gap between this growing inequality gap and who's got the wealth and who's owning the asset owning class kind of hoovering up more and more assets and making it difficult, not just for the working class, but the middle class. What I was going to come back and say is I do think all of those things have maybe neutered a lot of people. Like how on earth do you get on? Well, remember back to the student
union marches.
Loads of students came out campaigning for don't put the fees up from 3,000 to 9,000. Did it make a difference? No. So there was a big moment where people rose up and it didn't mean anything. And then the Iraq war, what was it, 2 million people on the streets? And they still went. So there's almost a sense of protest. It's like this kind of bygone era of where you could get out and you could protest and you could influence the discussion, you could influence policy. It doesn't feel like that happens anymore. It's young people. There are all the stats about young people don't vote. And it's a bit of a vicious cycle. They don't vote because they feel like nothing's going to happen to them. And because they don't vote, everything happens to them, all the bad things. But I can sort of understand the reticence of not wanting to get involved. Like, it doesn't, what's in it for me? They've already decided what they're going to do. They're already going to push it through and spin doctor their way through all of it. So,
but it's not just young people who don't vote. People our generation and older don't vote either. I mean, I know people in my family who have never voted. And the reason, because they don't feel that their vote is going to make any difference. But I think it's that attitude that your vote is not going to make a difference. Well, but if you voted for the right person, if you voted for more Diane Abbotts, if you voted for more Jeremy Corbyns, who actually had a vision and goals, your vote would have made a difference. But just sitting back and saying, I won't vote because my vote's not going to make a difference. Yes, your vote's not going to make a difference if you don't vote.
But didn't people vote for Jeremy Corbyn? Wasn't there she talks about that in the book, doesn't she? Doesn't she document his growth? And
especially young people.
The media crushed him. I'm sure it's much more nuanced than that. But even I could see, and like friends of mine who like just don't give a crap about politics were like, wow, like media properly don't like Jeremy Corbyn. They went for him, and they went for him every single day. But he was
wasn't just the
offering an
media.
alternative.
It wasn't just the media. It was the Labour Party that went for him. It was probably members of the Labour, or people within the Labour Party, the inner circle, that were briefing against him and sending the media all these stories. So that brings me, I guess, into politics and how the Labour Party operates. Now, for me, as I said, I knew there was this division between what the ones that describe themselves as centrists, who want to get elected because they believe that if they just stay on the left, they're never going to get elected. So they need to bring themselves more to the center. And then there's the left, who are socialists and are much more interested in, socialist ideas and developing society and developing communities and equality. But even within those groups, you have divisions. I didn't realize how fragmented the Labour Party itself was until I read this book, and I was like, goodness gracious me, how does anybody get into politics and work, and especially if your whole reason for going into politics is to try and make a change and to help your people? It just seems so difficult to actually go in and achieve anything. You have to compromise on so many things to get something. And so it just made me realize that this politics is just, for some people, it's just a game.
Okay, I hear that, and I agree, all the compromises, and then it ends up feeling like there's not really a difference between what's on offer. Is it two sides of the same coin? So can I maybe then go off on a tangent and ask, Trump has come in and by all accounts just set the world on fire. But he's come in and he's just bulldozed his way in, and he's doing things a completely different way. In some ways, reading a book or listening to Diane Abbott's take on this and having this movement, these ideas sort of crushed by a bigger machine, it sort of makes me understand a bit more the appeal of people like Trump, who I think he's just as of the establishment as the next man, but somehow they've worked out how to bulldoze their way through and completely upend a system which is always going to work against you, or is designed to operate as, to keep the status quo going. Complete other end of the political spectrum, but
don't you think it seems as if Diane is trying to work within the system with the system, while someone like Trump is prepared to work any way to get his objective met? It doesn't matter Trump whether he breaks the system or whatever. He's just focused on having his way, he and his people having his way. And the people that seem to vote him in seem to just, we don't care, whether he's going to the left or the right. All we want is some kind of change. You want everything to be shaken up, and he's a man that's going to shake everything up one way or the other.
Question, after reading Diane's book, do you think it's possible to deliver change working with that system?
You mean working within the Labour Party and trying to bring about change? Well, the thing is, because I think it's extremely frustrating. The book comes across, it's a frustrating system, because when your own people are calling you loony lefty, and they do not celebrate your victory when we're all Labour. I don't know. It just seems like you're going 10 steps and 9 steps back.
Or sometimes 11 steps back.
Or 11 steps back.
This goes back to your benevolent dictator, Jackie. And I can see, really can, as a result of reading this book, I can see the benefits of a benevolent dictator, where things actually happen. And because the dictator is benevolent, because it's normally a he, is doing things for, generally speaking, the common good. And so the people support him in the same way that many people support Trump. He's got that popular vote simply because he's bringing about a change. Whether the change is good or bad, we don't care. We just want to change. We don't want business as usual and the Washington swamp. So it's that same thing, isn't it? The system is not designed to bring about change. The system is designed to protect itself,
Maintain
and
the
it should
status
be
quo.
business as usual. How can she bring about any real change, she or Jeremy, within the system while you're working with the system? It's not really going to happen. Not significant change.
So if your brother, sister, whatever wanted to join a political party, it doesn't even have to be Labour, would you encourage them to, knowing what you know about how the political system operates?
I'd encourage them to form their own party or to bring about some kind of revolution.
Start
Smash
a
the whole
revolution.
system.
Okay.
It's interesting you say that, because I think they mentioned that Ken Livingstone wanted to be mayor of London and the Labour Party wouldn't support him, so he became an independent and won the election all on his own.
Yep.
So,
the same with Jeremy Corbyn. They withdrew the whip and kicked him out of the party, and he still won his seat.
having read Diane Abbott's book and just been so encouraged that despite all this, that, you know, she's been the MP for Hackney for over 30 years, that she continues. So you've got to be made of sterner stuff. Because, I mean, I was thinking, she goes back from apartheid South Africa to Grenfell to the Windrush scandal, like every aspect of British society that affects minorities, she's had a hand in. And that's a great thing. I don't know at what great personal cost to her. That's the concern.
But the problem, Yvonne, is that she's the exception to the rule, though, isn't she? She's one of those kind of American talented 10. She's the exception. How many others, if there's one Diane Abbott, 9 other black women or 9 other women have fallen by the wayside because the machine has just chewed them up and spat them out. It's just the Diane Abbotts that have that backbone made of Teflon that are able to survive for so long. There's only one Diane Abbott. 9 others have died along the way. So much wasted potential and talent.
But there are other black women. Let's not forget there are other black women now sitting in the Houses of Parliament, and I think more than a few of them will say positive things about Diane and her trailblazing. Mm-hmm. So she has stuck it out, and
it's a thing to be encouraged.
Yeah, and she's normalized.
How do you bring about change?
She's normalized. I think for me personally, I would probably say to somebody, read this book. Like, if after all of that you want to give it a go, like, don't go into it with your eyes closed. It's you know, it's going to be terrible. Like, particularly in this day and age, just the attacks, social media. Didn't you share a stat? Over half the abuse to MPs went to her in one particular reporting period. It's something almost. It's almost unbelievable. Like, there's also, it feels like pathological, like going after her. Like, why? Why so much at her?
But it's normalized.
To attack. And that's the worst thing, actually, Tara. They've normalized making a caricature out of her. They don't even know she went to Cambridge. You know, someone was saying things somewhere that she had to prove that she went to Cambridge or that she was educated. It's crazy.
It's a bit like Michelle Obama, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, is she a woman? And all these kind of, you know, so intense.
This is why I say, do we give up? Because I think even in corporate, you feel like you're going to war anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's the answer?
Yeah, what do you do?
Well, I say yes, go for it.
Fight, as Trump would say.
I think it gets hard. Stop, have some paracetamols, and then get up.
I do think you need a support network around you. Yvonne, you said before about how she stands her ground. She does. Maybe I'm a bit naive, but I look back on some things and I think, oh, you could have played that game a little bit better. So I think the role of people like Diane is you've got to turn around to the next generation and tell them, prepare yourself. You've got to be media savvy. Prepare yourself as much as you can, but expect the unexpected. If we all just back off, then they've won, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody has to keep going. Not every MP in Parliament wants to be there to get into cabinet. Some people are more than happy just to stay representing their constituents for an extended period. And maybe that's good enough. But if you want to get onto the front bench, you're going to get your hands dirty and everything else.
So do you think then this relative would have more success as a Tory or Lib Dem than within Labour? Given as we've had an Asian Tory leader, we've had a black woman leading the Tory party, we've had a black Chancellor of the Exchequer, all within the Tory party. Do you feel that you have more chance as a black person or a minority person within the Conservative Party than you do within Labour?
I think being a minority and a Conservative is part of your shtick, right? Look, Suella Braverman. I'm Indian, but even I will talk about anti-immigrants. She says that, she's quite proud of, I will say the sayable, I will say the things that no one else wants to say. And
isn't that what Badenoch says as well, or does?
Yes, that's the line you have to take. I don't know if it's...
You'd be the spokesperson on race, or you'd be the spokesperson on gender or whatever.
No, they're not though. They're anti-race.
Yeah,
they're anti their own race.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. But
and then the point is,
you're the one
even though they're of colour and they're saying these things.
Sorry, you were both talking at the same time.
I'll pause.
What was your question, Taiwo?
No, I'm saying, is there an expectation because you are, this is your role, because you belong to that community, therefore you can speak to the community, unlike...
No, but they're not speaking to the community.
No,
they're speaking against the community.
Exactly, but that's your role, that's your purpose in the Tory party.
To say that, so you're saying
what Taiwo is saying is that because you're from that community, you can be hard-hitting, whereas if, say, someone who's Caucasian, they will be told you're racist, you're racist, you're racist. But if you are from that community, I mean, it's quite bizarre. But perhaps Taiwo has a point.
What Taiwo is saying is that if you're Asian and you came out with some anti-Asian rhetoric, you can get away with it.
Yeah.
So that's why they put you in position. Whereas if you're a white person and said some of the things that the Asian person would say, you wouldn't be able to get away with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. But to your point about who these people were talking about, the positions they've risen to, I do think it's something interesting to consider. I don't think they've just risen to those positions because of rhetoric around race, anti or otherwise. Sunak was the Chancellor and then he was the Prime Minister. Suella Braverman, but she was Home Secretary. Then you had Priti Patel, Development Secretary. They've risen to some pretty senior positions. And it's one of the criticisms of Labour is they haven't even had a female leader, let alone a leader of colour. So
I think with the Tories, you kind of know where you are, right?
Yeah.
So when you go in, you know where you are and where you stand. You know what they stand for. And it's all about the economy. And you know where they stand on race. You know where they stand on immigration. Whereas with Labour, they're kind of, you don't know.
I think with Labour, there's probably a false sense of inclusiveness from the outside.
Yeah.
Because they are accepting of Blacks, Jews, or any other. So you go in with expectations. And this is why I fell off my chair when I started reading this book, because I was like, well, they're just out to destroy each other. And you can actually feel like an outsider in a party where you should belong the most, which is what I found remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I found that the least surprising. I feel like I've had, as somebody who's worked in government, as somebody who's worked in, the leftiest of left industries development, often there is a bias that can hide itself behind the work that you do. I must be a good person. Look at the job that I do. I must be a good person. I've employed I've employed someone of colour in my office. But I think what she reveals in this is they carry their prejudices just as much as the next person. In fact, it almost feels even more insulting because it's the prejudice of low expectation.
And in fact, it felt like, yes, we will fight for South Africa and making sure that apartheid ends, as long as it's blacks out there. But let's not have a black in my office sitting next to me with the same intellect or better. They must. It's that white savior mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're here to save you. You can't save yourself.
And that's pretty much what the Labour Party is, isn't it? We're doing all these things for these people, but we can't let them get to the same positions as we.
You can't celebrate. I mean, she becomes the first black MP in 1987. No one is celebrating with her.
Yeah.
They're calling a conference instead to work out what to do with them, because there were 4 of them elected at the same time, and they called a conference because all of a sudden there are 4 black people in parliament. What the hell do we do? It was just shocking.
I mean, but it continues. I think that's one of the surprising things that came out for me is she's still facing that. So we talked about, the man who made these, really horrible remarks about makes you want to kill all black women.
Yes.
And she stood 46 times.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let her speak. And it was because Sunak didn't want her to say anything. This is when Rishi Sunak was still Prime Minister. And neither did Starmer. So they were willing to take the hit of her standing up and not being allowed to say anything than hearing her speak. So...
But is that also part of the issue? This thing that she's a black woman. If we treat her that way, we can get away with it.
Yes, and it's her.
But in some ways, they don't really care. They don't really care. They'll take, as you said, they'll take the hit, whatever that hit may be. We're prepared to take it rather than to allow her. That gatekeeping mentality is just so fierce and so strong. They allow anyone else to get through, but not her.
But even I remember somewhere, I think she was talking about Peter Mandelson and the fact that, with question time, that anyone that goes, you're briefed, you're told how to conduct yourself, questions that might come up and all that. And she, dutifully called him many times and he just never answered.
Setting
you up to fail. That's what they were doing. And it's one of your own.
You wanted her to fail, and yet...
You wanted her to fail.
And then you could say, look, if we do this again, it'll never go right. Yeah. But the
way they treated her, to be honest, because the way I used to vote in the past was generally Labour. But the way they treated her, I just lost all hope in the Labour Party. I couldn't bear to actually vote for them. There's no way I could vote Tory at the time. So I just thought, and I don't want to spoil my ballot, I just went with Green. I just felt, I'm going to have to vote somewhere because I can't bear not to vote, but I just can't vote Labour. They can't take me for granted in that way.
And just going, not to turn this into a US podcast, that's exactly the fate that the Democrats suffered in the US. The people they took for granted couldn't vote for them anymore. Okay. Like there was young men of colour, this comical thing of these young men being advertised and talking in support of Trump and then everyone repeating back to them things Trump have said and saying, I don't care. It was they couldn't bring themselves to vote for the Democrats. And Taiwo's point about being taken for granted, that incident really did. I feel like I'm at this point unshockable, but that really did leave a horrible taste in my mouth, that one. Couldn't like the man standing up. Yeah. And then this conversation back and forth on, is this racist? Let's have a debate about it. And this long silence. And eventually everybody comes out and says, yes, it was. But I think she documents, it took a while. It wasn't an immediate denouncement of what was said. It was this kind of mealy-mouthed commentary. So I don't know whether the thing that I'm missing is the dislike of Abbott is it feels intensely personal.
It is. I think it is.
I definitely think her being her black woman has shaped a lot of the response to her, but it feels more.
And also she's outspoken. She doesn't take things.
It feels personal because it's almost like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who do you think you are?
As you said earlier on, she stands her ground.
She stands
so because she doesn't give in.
She will become MP. She will go for the leadership thing. She will stand up.
Yeah.
Like Trump and Vance when they ambushed Zelensky. The whole issue of you're not grateful. How dare you? You are just not grateful. Or basically, you're not grateful enough. Look at all we've done for you. You're not grateful enough. You should be bowing down and kissing our shoes.
And wearing a suit.
And you're not even wearing a suit. Yes.
That was so petty. That was just so petty. You're not wearing a suit.
I know.
He never wears a suit. And he actually said the day he'll wear a suit is when the war stops.
That was all.
Because he wants to be like his soldiers.
Yeah. Really insightful. Some horrible truths. I would love for somebody to stick a microphone in front of some of the people she talks about, like Alistair Campbell, who's now, liberal crusade, sets the world to rights.
He will not care. He really would not care. I hear how he talks about, because I do every so often listen to him and Rory Stewart's podcast.
I can't anymore. He just put me off.
Yeah, he will not care at all. He knew what he was doing.
He won't care. I think he will care if the question is put to him by someone of significance.
What do you mean by someone of significance?
If little old me went up to him and asked him about it, it'd kind of talk you down. Someone of stature, someone who...
Like the Dalai Lama?
Not the Dalai Lama, but, let's say on the podcast.
Well, Keir Starmer's not going to do it.
No, I don't think they will. Who knows? Isn't this a man who still justifies the Iraq war and says they thought they were doing the right thing at the time? So, I don't know.
Yeah.
In some places, it felt very sad, and what came through for me was hurt, actually.
Not the resilience, not the fact that despite everything that she's been through, she's shown that actually...
Yeah, she is. Yeah, the resilience comes through, don't get me wrong. And we've all seen the strong black woman trope. Whatever the world throws at you, she survives. But whatever the world throws at you, it can bring you down as well. Of course it does. That for me came through without her saying I was hurt.
There's a cost, isn't there? There has to be a cost. Because you're a human being.
To this kind of almost constant rejection, like you talked about, the briefing, the way she was spoken to, the way she reported on, it's the volume of bile she receives on social media.
Yeah.
And didn't she came very close to not standing?
Yes, this last time. She almost quit. She says that had they given her the whip back, she would have stepped down. After she made the comment, there was an investigation. A decision was made almost immediately, but she was never told because they did not want to give her the whip back. And so Keir Starmer just kept, putting it off. And that annoyed her and annoyed the people around her. But had they given her the whip back, she says that she would have left, she would have quit.
And that doesn't surprise me. She must be exhausted.
She's still there,
it's humorous, I mean, when she was talking about Gordon Brown, the way she says, from the very beginning, there was something anticlimactic about the Brown premiership.
He was, though. He was terrible. It was bad. He came
out from the word-go.
He, it's these delusions of grandeur, and he just could never measure up.
Yeah. And there was something else. When David, the Miliband brothers, when he says, "But I've written my speech already."
I know that was funny.
That was so funny.
Yeah, that was hilarious.
I think for me, it was how she described when Jeremy eventually took her out on a date.
Jesus.
to the cemetery, and then when they went on holiday, and how she was expecting, this nice break in France, and they ended up at a campsite. So it's how she described those things and the manner in which she said these things, just so matter of factly, and then in such a funny way as well.
Yeah.
There was a lot of humor. It kind of broke some of the really heavy elements of it.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that we haven't talked about is the power of, because she did have a lot of jobs. So she left university, started up at the Home Office, then she went for Liberty, or I can't remember what it was called before that.
Liberty,
yeah, which became Liberty, and then from there she went into TV.
Yeah,
she was a news researcher, and then after that she then became a councillor and then ran for Parliament. So she has had a lot of different jobs in a lot of different fields and industries. And it just goes to show the determination, this self-belief that I can do anything if I actually really want to. And I like that quality in her. But what I wanted to ask about the civil service and her experience in the civil service, because she did a few roles. I think at the Home Office she was, first of all working for, is it prisons? And then was she doing something with immigration? Or police? I think it was police.
I thought it was immigration, wasn't it?
It was immigration.
Oh,
it was prisons, definitely.
It was, prisons first, and then
something else. She was moved from prisons to something else, which I can't remember. But her experience there just showed her how much power the civil servants have, where a minister may want to do something and achieve something, but if civil servants disagree with it, they'll just pass it along, change it, hold meetings, and by the time they've made some kind of decision on it, the minister's already left the job. He's been moved on to another department. And I don't know whether this is still the case, especially with the SPADs, whether the civil service still have this much power, and if they do, should they, given as they're not elected?
I'm not sure they do. That has long been the criticism, that they have too much power. But there's been a concerted effort, definitely by the last government, to try and break that stranglehold. And they've done that by getting rid of key figures, sackings, moving people around, moving people on. I think the role of the SPAD, the special advisor, unelected, not civil servants themselves, but they operate with a very clear political agenda, who can come in and their job is to drive things forward, to get things done. So it maybe still happens, but I don't feel like, in my own personal experiences, it doesn't happen to the extent that she talked about. That was interesting. Did anybody ever remember an old TV show called Yes Minister?
Yeah,
that's what it. I felt like it was characterized.
Yeah.
The dim-wit minister, and
we have to guide him.
Yes, we'll tell him.
And they just frustrate his ambitions.
Yeah,
because they decide. Is that a bad thing? That you do have this unelected class who work in.
Well, if they're driving policy and setting policy, then I think it is. If they're not elected, then it's not a good thing, because where are they getting their mandate from?
Yes, but I think the problem with elections now is it's short-termism, and everybody is governing in election cycles. And actually, if you look at some of the big challenges we're facing, we need people to start making decisions for the long term. Like social care has been a long time coming. No politician, no MP
No one's going to do that.
Exactly. But maybe this unelected blob will do something. But
even they haven't done anything.
Yeah, and they will say because they have to answer to the whims of the minister. but
do they?
But recently, wouldn't you say, recently in the news, things like prison reform, particularly in terms of the fact that the prison system is not working for women. that seems to have been something that the current prisons minister and also her Tory counterpart, they both seem to be saying that too many women are going to prison for short periods of time, custodial sentences that aren't necessary, that destroy families and careers, etc., etc., etc. We need to do something about it.
Is anything being done? Civil servants actually doing anything about it?
Well, they have some kind of justice. Is it justice? I don't know what it's called. Justice working group or something like that, where they're looking into
Parliamentary working group.
Is it justice?
But those working groups have always existed. There's always a parliamentary working group on something or other, and they've always existed. And we still, I mean, I'm pretty sure there've been plenty on social care, but yet we still have exactly the same problems as we did about 10, 20 years ago.
There have been reports, surveys, commissions, the whole malarkey. No one wants to take it on. Well, even go back to, is it 2017? Theresa May did. She put social care at the heart of her election, and she got decimated in the polls. Her majority was really cut back. I don't see why my taxes or the taxes of someone without assets should pay for the social care of somebody with a great deal of number of assets who can pay for their own social care. But there's a great swathe of people who think, I've got my assets, pass them on to the children, and
the children will put you into social care.
It's so like, it feels so complicated and all these social norms bound up with it. But it's not the only issue, but there are just these, I think you're right, there are these big issues that are just being neglected. I think it would be naive to say that the elected politician is going to sort it out. I just don't think they're incentivized to.
But do you not think that because the civil service they're permanent, supposedly non-political, and they are supposed to provide that expert advice, and they're on the day-to-day, and as you say, the ministers are fleeting. Well, they move quite quickly depending on the political winds. And on paper, they're supposed to be neutral, but because of all this, because of the fact that they're permanent and they have their expertise, I think they have become very powerful.
They have, and I don't think.
And how do you change that?
Without
do a Trump.
Do a Trump, yeah.
Oh, yes.
You're right. Yeah, they've got their own biases and issues, and they, like many MPs, they're a small little boys' club who come from certain universities, certain backgrounds, particularly back then. I don't know. It's just, isn't this even more reason just to be a little bit depressed about the system and think, well, how do you get around this? How do you change things?
It's little wonder the youth and the young people are absolutely disillusioned, because there just doesn't seem to be any way out of where we find ourselves. And I totally see why people would vote for Trump, because of they want a reset, a change, and a complete new system that serves them. Not that Trump is the right person to bring it in.
Well, not the magnitude of the US aid. That ship.
I actually think US aid was a good thing. Withdrawing US aid was a good thing, in my view.
I knew you would say that. I knew you would say that. And
maybe it's the manner in which it was done. I don't know.
Yeah, that felt.
You needed the shock.
Really harsh.
You needed the shock.
I was listening. There was an interview with somebody from, forgot her name, but worked at the African Union, and she said, "Good riddance."
Yeah.
So
I say the same thing. Absolutely.
The African government would need to step up then.
Yes.
Step up now.
Yes, definitely. Start paying for some of this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, the aid never really benefited these African countries. It benefited the Western governments themselves, but it never benefited the African countries because of the conditions and the where they're given as loans in terms of the loans, and then the cost that it actually the amount that it actually costs to host all these US government and charity organizations in these countries. It just took all the money. So who was benefiting at the end of the day? Who was it serving?
That was my big issue with the narrative around this. We need to look after people at home, like people after seas, as if the Americans hadn't been the biggest beneficiary of their investment in some of these countries, particularly the US. I don't know if you've come across the term like tide aid before. So Americans would invest and they had tide aid, which meant that if they had contracts they needed to give out, let's say we're going to build a well in country X, the first offer would always be made to American companies to come and build the well. It's interesting to me watching the reporting on the story. Poor Joe Bloggs in South Africa who's got HIV and he's dying because he's not going to get all these drugs. And there's part of me that's thinking, well, yeah, give those drugs straight to the government so they can continue to distribute them. Oh, no. I bet as soon as like the South African government tries to come and do a deal with you, they won't get them at the same volume, at the same price. So I can understand people who say they like the shock, but don't for a second think America wasn't benefiting from that investment or American industry wasn't. Like, absolutely was.
And I think they manufactured some of these problems. I mean, I keep hearing about this AIDS epidemic in Uganda. And I'm like, what is AIDS epidemic? Seriously, I go to Uganda all the time. I've not heard of any area where there's a huge AIDS epidemic.
They would say that's social stigma. They would say that's social stigma.
AIDS is not a big deal in Uganda as it was in the 1980s. It really isn't. So I yes, they do manufacture some of these problems. They do, so that they can keep themselves in jobs. It's true. It is so true.
I think they definitely create a. Geez, it's like this is a past life. There's a dependency culture that builds up, and that was disheartening for me because I definitely, when I first started working in development, let's go out there, we're going to fix the problems, let's go, really do good things. And then you spend a couple of years in that quagmire, you meet some of the partners, you realise the trade-offs, the dirty deals that are being made as part of these things. The governments who totally broke, but, live very well in other ways. So who knows? I knew when that story came up, I honestly was sitting there going, Jackie's loving this. I understand.
Yeah. NGOs, get rid of them. But anyway.
I need to introduce you to one of my friends. He's from Sierra Leone, but he's spent like most of his adult years in the UK. And the question I'd always ask him, what did you do? First thing I would do is get rid of all these NGOs.
Exactly. That's the first thing I would do.
Broke my heart the first time you said that. I can't. I get it. I've seen it. I understand it. I get it. Like these.
Have you guys heard of Kwanda?
No, go on. Tell us more.
So Kwanda is a member-led organization where members donate a certain amount of money on a monthly basis. You can donate from £5, but the money is given directly to the people on the ground. So they have projects on the ground that they work with, local people on the ground doing this work. And then every month, members vote on what projects the money should be given to. And then at the end of the project, you actually see accounts, you see pictures of what they're doing. For me, that is how you do charity. You can actually see the impact that it's making. You can actually see the people and how their lives have changed. They don't have anybody from the organization on the ground living there, overseeing the projects. No, these are local people in their own countries, doing the work to lift themselves up. And they're given money so that they can start businesses, so that they can start projects to uplift themselves up out of their situations. And that's an organization I give money to because I know that the money is going directly.
I totally get that. Even before that, I would say, the biggest investment in many of these countries is remittances.
Yeah. It's
It's
true.
people going abroad and sending money back home, like multiples of the amounts that are being invested.
People in the diaspora.
Yeah. Or, you know,
Supporting
the
their home
people who
country.
goes ahead to work and then sends all, yeah.
Yeah.
The amounts they're huge, but
Staggering.
it's never talked about as a transfer or an investment, but it is in many of these countries. It's just an investment
It does,
directly to the hands of people or
and it
families.
does more than actually the aid that all these countries send to go and do capacity building and all the other big words that they like to use. But anyway, let me stop. When you get me started on charities and NGOs, and yeah, I
think we can all agree Diane exposes some of the hypocrisies in the charity sector
she does.
in A Woman Like Me. And
She does.
we agree, Diane.
And anyhow, so I guess we need to end on a positive note, given us the book itself, despite all the hardships and the challenges, didn't feel like a heavy book. And it was still uplifting for me, knowing that this woman has gone through all of this and has succeeded, and she's still there, and she's still fighting for her values and for what she believes in. And so for me, it just left me saying, okay, yeah, she's suffered a lot, but actually, yeah, go for it. So I want us to leave on a positive note, be inspired by Diane. What little thing can we do ourselves to give the younger people hope?
These sorts of conversations, being engaged in these discussions, maybe it's not going to move the dial massively, but I do think we need to be more engaged in policy discussions, in things that Diane Abbott is talking about. We don't have to retreat. We do have a stake. These do have an impact on our lives, so we should absolutely be at the table and taking part and making decisions where we can. And I say I agree with you. I liked that the book ended not on a down note, but just a reinforcing on this is why I came into politics. I'm 70 plus years old, but I still believe in these things. So, yeah, maybe a little bit of a rallying cry at the end. These are things that are still matter and we should care about.
I agree that whole idea of emphasizing hope and belief, because the alternative is not worth thinking about. And also that the whole idea of encouraging younger people to get involved, even though it may seem as if they're not making a difference, or it may all seem uphill. And even if they don't in their own lifetime see a change, that doesn't mean that the fight isn't worth fighting just because they may not feel as if they're winning the battle. It's still worth doing anyway.
I think Diane Abbott is my hero. Honestly, I think she just encourages me and everyone to just give it a go. It's going to be a difficult climb, but just keep at it.
Yeah,
that's how change happens. It's not going to be given to us on a silver plate.
I agree with you. But one thing I would say is that you don't even have to be a politician. You don't have to go into politics to do these things, to make the change. You can be a school governor. But on top of that, there's also the opportunity to volunteer on a exclusion panels. Black children get excluded more than your average white child. So if you're, as a Black person, on that panel, you can make a difference on that child's life. Be a local councillor. All these small things, if we all got involved, will make the difference. But I do feel that we need to get off our sofas and out of in front of Netflix and actually go out and take action. I feel that we spend way too much time now engaged in entertaining ourselves, and we kind of need to stop doing that and actually take action and do positive things that will change the society within which we live.
They're saying we need to get our hands dirty in the trenches.
Like Diane did when she first started, yes.
Can I share then? I feel like can I share that I've, last month I was appointed as a school governor.
Good, well done.
Thank you.
So, yeah, it's funny you said that. So just some early conversations and just listening to people talk about, we need well-adjusted young people and we need people with fair-minded. And I thought, yeah, that's really important, but they need to be able to read as well. Although I've even done it, just hearing you say that makes me feel a bit more encouraged about having done it, if that makes sense. You're absolutely right. We do need to turn up.
And you show up, if we're going to change the society that we live in, we have to.
Yeah.
Collectively have to do it. We can't leave it to just Diane Abbott to fight the fight for us. And on that note, even before you go, how to 5?
The book itself, I'd say maybe 4 out of 5. I think it was a great book. I think there were parts, though, maybe because I already knew the politics. It just felt like I was being reminded of what happened in 2017 or whenever. That was the only thing. But I love the book. I like the fact that it's matter of fact. It just tells you what's happening. I like her style. In fact, I started watching her videos from the 70s, the 80s, because I was reading the book. I just wanted to hear her voice. And no, she's an amazing lady, and I love the book.
Great. Thank you. So, Tayo, out of 5.
I'm still going low, unfortunately. I still didn't find the book a great read.
Have you read it a second time?
No, there's no way I'm reading it a second time.
Have you listened to it?
I need to listen to it. Maybe that would bump up the rating. I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. And I do have a lot of admiration for her, and also sympathy for, her personal life, especially because there was a significant price that she had to pay, I think for a large extent because of the profession which she has devoted her life to. It'd be very difficult to maintain intimate relationships over the long term when you give so much and so much is expected of you in public life. But also it's just the unfairness. And as I think whether Kay or whether it was you, Jackie, that was talking about the sense of hurt that comes during the book. And I think there's a very good reason to feel hurt because it's so unjust. All that she has been able to achieve despite so much opposition, and yet still it's like a visceral hatred for her. It's almost pathological. It's so unreasonable. But I'm sticking with the 3 over 5.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd give it 4. I thought it was a good read, really insightful. I think if the job of a memoir is to kind of change or in some way change your mind, what you think about that person, offer a different perspective, it certainly did that. Some bits felt familiar, others I was just really interested to learn about her background and that early journey. I'm glad she wrote it. I think these stories need to be captured and need to be told. So I'm glad that she documented that. She documented her experience, and I would recommend it. I've recommended it to my mum. So yeah, 4 out of 5.
Yeah. Just you said it was good that she's documented it. Do you think that history will treat her differently when historians come to write about her? I don't know, in 100 years from now. Do you think they will treat her differently?
Yeah, I think they will.
I think they'll be more generous.
I think there are people in the Labour Party who will treat her differently when she's finally out of the Houses of Parliament. And I think you can't deny the achievements. Take the person out of it, the personality. You can't deny the achievements and strides she's made. Well, she's now the mother of the house, the longest serving.
She is, yeah.
She is. I can't say I've agreed with every single thing she said, but she keeps being re-elected in Hackney for a reason. Not because she's a black woman, because actually she's a decent constituency MP. So I hope it will. I hope it will.
I hope so too. And as for the book, I agree with you. I give it a 4.5 out of 5. I like the style. I know, Tayo, you disagree, but I like that matter-of-fact style. I like the fact that she didn't go into the gossip bits, because I think that would be kind of lowering the tone. I like the fact that she just documents her life and how she's seen it. And I feel like there's a lot of information in there. There's a lot about the workings of a political party that you learn about. There's a lot about the things you have to do if you want to make it as a politician, the maneuverings that you have to do, the deals that you have to cut. And so yeah, I definitely recommend anybody that wants to go into politics to actually read this book and try and understand what you're getting yourself into. And for people who say that their votes don't matter, I would also recommend that you read this book so you can understand why the system is the way it is, and then hopefully be able to take some course of action to actually change it. But yeah, so thank you very much for the conversation, and speak to you guys again soon.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this or any of our other episodes, please subscribe, like and share on Spotify, YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Till next time, bye bye.